The Accidental Entrepreneur is brought to you with the help of our sponsor, AWeber, the world's leading small business email marketing and automation service provider. Since 1998, AWeber has helped more than 1 million small businesses and entrepreneurs through its suite of web-based email marketing, automation tools, and education. AWeber, the best option when it comes to marketing your business. The podcast is also brought to you by the Alternative Board. Since 1989, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has been one of the leading peer advisory and business coaching organizations for independent business owners and CEOs across the world. By facilitating peer advisory boards, private one-on-one coaching, and strategic planning services, TAB helps business owners improve their businesses in ways that change their lives. And be sure to connect with our affiliate sponsor, GSM Growth Agency. They're boosting e-commerce businesses to 6 and 7 figures in revenue and cover everything from ads and social media influencers to making your website better. GSM Growth Agency focuses on taking businesses from startup success to bigger success, going above and beyond to make sure growth sticks around. They're all about cool ideas, lasting partnerships, and making your mark in the e-commerce world. And be sure to support the podcast by ordering some logo merchandise from our online store. Listen to all of our sponsors' commercials later in this episode and follow their links in the show notes to learn more about their products and services. Okay, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I have a guest today. I love having guests on who have done it before, grown businesses, and they're like in the middle of growth of another business. So we'll get to hear from Brigham in a minute about what he's doing in the franchising space. If you are listening on your favorite directory, leave us a 5-star review. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe, hit the like button so we can keep connecting with people like Brigham. So let's get on with today's show.
The information provided in these episodes is for entertainment purposes only. It is not a guarantee of success or to be construed as advice of any kind. You should always seek advice from local licensed professionals before making any decisions.
The dictionary defines an entrepreneur as a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. People often start a business without much choice, perhaps due to a job loss or just being dissatisfied at work, and they come up with an idea they just know can be successful. They become entrepreneurs by accident. That is to say, their success or failure happens by accident, not with intention. My name is Mitch Beinhecker. I'm a corporate attorney and a business advisor. You're listening to The Accidental Entrepreneur, my podcast about how to achieve success on purpose, not by accident. Join me along with our monthly guests, where we share our knowledge and help you get a hold of your business. And now on to today's episode. All right, Brigham, thanks for joining me. I know it's early where you are, so I appreciate it whenever the guests come on a Friday morning and they're 3 or 4 hours behind me. So, but I guess it's good that I don't cut into your day, right, in terms of what you're doing today. So,
getting a good start in the morning.
Exactly.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Mitch.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming on. All right, so why don't we? Because I think franchising, and we're not talking about necessarily. Well, we'll talk a little bit about how you franchise, but you're not a guy who like sells franchises. I've had people on that do that. You're a guy who's in the business. You're the franchisor, building the system, building the business, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I started the franchise in 2021, and it's a Brazilian waxing and sugaring franchise.
Okay, so 2021. So it's been about 3 years. So maybe we can go back before that, because I know you've owned other businesses, and you don't just wake up one day and say, I'll start a sugaring business. So obviously there's something worked up to that, right? Maybe I'll let you go back and tell the story of when you got started.
Yeah, I'll give you a brief history. So I was in college. I was feeling stuck in a lot of ways. Just felt like everyone was like the same, right? And I just wanted to get out. And so I moved to Thailand. I lived in a bungalow. And I was on an island for a while, and there's nothing to do on islands. I mean, literally nothing. Right. And the guy beside me was an SEO expert, and he started teaching me, because what else do you do on an island?
In a hammock or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like literally exactly like that. And so he started teaching me SEO. I started a company doing pay-per-click advertising, PPC. It's like paid ads basically. And I was trying to like get business with him, but he didn't want to work with me because I didn't have any idea what I was doing. So I was using Craigslist, hustling because there's nothing else you can do. And because you can't pick coconuts for a living, you got to figure something out. Right. So I was just using Craigslist, finding clients. And eventually I built a portfolio of paid advertising clients. And fast forward a couple of years, I was running probably 5 clients at the time, and I was
Right.
running a couple $1 million in advertising. And I was
from the beach in Thailand.
no, I mean, I eventually left this little, Yoda style island of reclusiveness. And but I'd been traveling. So I traveled for about 5 years, where I would just live out of a suitcase 3 to 6 months in a country and then move on to the next country. It was a cool life.
Basically remote, right? I mean, you didn't need to be at the client. Everything's done virtually, right? So you could live anywhere.
Yeah, and it was in my early 20s. I mean, this is like the best time to travel as well. I mean, you're totally free. Yeah, and it was cool. I learned a lot about cultures and people, and I got to see a very non-judgmental view of the world by being able to live in their shoes instead of just seeing things, through a photo lens. Yeah. So fast forward, it was 2026, and then I was just at somebody's house, and I was talking to them, and she was complaining about how much she had to pay in taxes. She was like, "Yeah, I had to pay $20,000 in taxes." And for me at that time, like $20,000 was a lot of money to pay in taxes. I was like, "Whoa, like how much money do you make?" She goes, I think I made 100,000 last year." And I was like, $100,000? Like, that's a lot of money. Like, what do you do? And I thought she was like a hairdresser. And she goes, "No, I do waxing. I'm an esthetician, Brazilian waxing." And I'm like, "Okay, run that by me." And she's like, "Yeah, I make like $45 in a service, and I do 15-minute services." So she's making $180 an hour. And I'm like, "You make $180 an hour?" I'm like, "That's more than a lawyer." Like, no offense, Mitch. You probably make more than that. Not really, but that's my like 26-year-old brain, I was like, "That's more than a lawyer."
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was like, "Okay, well, how do you find your clients?" She's like, "I just run a Groupon." And I was like, "Wow." And then like, "Well, how do you get them to come back?" She's like, "Oh, it's really easy. Like, hair grows back. Like, they just come back to me." And she's like in this one-room studio making $100,000 a year. This is like the most incredible thing. And
well, Brigham, I mean, I know you were like 26, but if you're making $100,000 and you're paying $20,000, that's only 20%. That's not too bad.
That's not too bad. Yeah. She's got a good CPA.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And so, it's like at that point I was like, okay, you've got recurring clientele, and this is my like small brain at the time. Like, I'm not I'm not a genius. Like, looking back, you're like, "Oh, this is like really smart." But like, it just like some things excited me. Like the fact that clients just came back month over month. Right. The fact that, the cost of product is so low. It's like $3 for a wax product. And she's got such a high margin on this. I'm like, okay, like I could do this. Yeah. So I didn't have a ton of money at the time, because I was, not broke, but I wasn't doing great. And so I hired her. I paid her $1,400. I brought her down to Phoenix. One of my clients was a plastic surgeon, and I put a waxing salon in the back of his office in this like 10 by 10 room. He already had the equipment and everything. And so I was off to the races, man. Like, I was just built a website in a month and was up and running. Like, I had no idea what a Brazilian was. Like, I went and got my first service, and I was like, why would anybody ever do this? It's so painful.
Yeah. So you were running the business. She was doing the treatments, right? So, because you knew nothing about waxing. It's not like you grew up in the waxing business. You're like, "Oh, I'm going to bring this to America." No.
Yeah, no, she was the one that she trained my esthetician. And so I hired somebody else. Yeah. And then the person that was trained was working for me in Phoenix. She lived in another state and came down to it to help train her.
Got it. Okay. Right. But you weren't doing the waxing. You had somebody working for you who was doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not be the esthetician. That is 100% accurate. Right. I mean, this is just waxing like swimsuit area, if you can think of that. It's like the Brazilian area.
Yeah, no, I know Brazilian, right? Exactly. But I think it's interesting because it doesn't really matter what the business is. You saw the business model being something that's recurring revenue, right? Yep. Something that's very relatively low entry cost, something that has cost of goods is low. It's like you got to spend $100,000 to make $100,000. So the model made sense. You didn't really matter what they did. You can hire the woman to do the Brazilian waxing. Who cares, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
I think it's
exactly.
a lot of people miss that. You have the fundamentals. It doesn't matter that you didn't know the business. It wasn't a big learning curve. You just hire the person, whatever.
Yeah, and I think if I'm looking back and being like two other like missteps that were very intelligent were the fact that I
Yeah.
hired somebody that was in a career and not a job. This isn't high
Okay.
turnover fields, right? Like a job would be working at a fast food restaurant. A career is going to school for this aesthetic school and then
Right.
doing something in your trade. The retention is much higher on a career oriented field. And the second,
Right.
aha moment I have now looking back is that I picked a business that had the opportunity for massive scale. I live in a city of 5 million people, Phoenix, Arizona,
Okay.
and there's the opportunity to put 20 to 25 salons. So once you figure the business out, the replication of it becomes the next logical step. And that's where the volume and the money is in retail businesses.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, it wasn't like you couldn't identify the marketplace, right? They're women of certain ages.
Yeah.
That's about it. In a warmer climate, they're going to do it more than in a colder climate where they're wearing a lot of clothes and things like that. So, and your hair grows back. It's like getting your hair cut, right? So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And one thing that was like shocking to me is I thought that this was a bikini thing. I thought I'd be very busy in the summertime. In Phoenix, because people
You're right.
leave in the summer, in some areas I do worse in the summer than I do in the winter, ironically.
Oh, right. Because Phoenix is really hot in the summertime.
Yeah, so it's like sunbirds instead of snowbirds. Like people leave in the summer, so we get less population in some of the areas. So waxing is,
Yeah.
we have a salon in a ski town that does very well in the winter because there's a college there, and waxing is something that people do for intimate reasons, like not
Yeah.
for going to the beach.
Right. Walking around outside. Right. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. So my daughter is going to University of Arizona, which I think is in Tucson, right?
Yep.
But Phoenix has there's Arizona State there. So all the kids are gone, right, by May something. Plus you got people leaving because it's freaking. I remember when my sister went to Arizona State. I remember when she graduated. This was like in May. This wasn't in July. It was so freaking hot. You couldn't be outside without like being in a pool up to your neck. I mean, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine being there in the summertime.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's miserable in the summer. Yeah, it is very hot.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So this was how many years ago?
So this was, the replication process of the business happened from middle 2015 until 2020. That was prior to franchising.
Right. That was like testing the concept, making the business work, learning the system, seeing that you're making money, right? You can't just start a business and franchise the next day.
No,
Right.
like the process to franchising a business is you need to own it for like 1 to 2 years, and you need to be able to show strong unit economics at that store. So some people who are like lifetime franchisors, they'll buy a business that's already done well, and then they'll go immediately to market with franchising it. And they use sales organizations to jump stream the process.
Right. Right. Because they're buying not a finished product, but a well thought out product. They're already proving the concept. So now you're selling it to them. And then look, some people franchising is too daunting to them, so they can sell their business or just sell the franchise concept, right? Couldn't you keep your business, keep your location,
100%.
sell the right franchise, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then take essentially a royalty stream on that franchise business. And you see this a lot in home restoration businesses. That's the one that's like the most common that you see this in, because there's so many unique niches, the junk lugger guys, they move your junk. I mean, that's such a niche thing, but in that field, there's tons and tons of opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. It's some of this stuff is funny because, and I guess I give too much credit to people, running a business and operating a business and the systems to run a business. Sometimes you look at these franchise ideas and you're like, why would I pay a franchise to do when I can just go pick up junk with my truck? But if you join a system, you have a whole business process, how to run your business and accounting and payroll and dealing with employees and all that kind of stuff that you don't get on your own, I guess, right? Is that why people are attracted to it?
Yeah, like sometimes franchising gets a bad rep, and sometimes franchising is the best thing you could possibly do. And I go to a lot of the conferences, and there are super wealthy franchise owners. So people need to get out of that headspace of franchising is like an MLM. It's not at all like that.
Right.
A franchise is successful if they can create economies of scale, right? So I'll give you an example. In Hello Sugar, we spent $250,000 last year on reception tech. We have an AI chatbot. We completely eliminated reception from salons. And so they don't have to have a
Right.
receptionist. We do everything online, everything through text. If I had one salon, I don't even make 250,000 a year. I couldn't spend that much on AI tech, right? So because of the economies of scale, we're able to get a 7% reduction in the expense of reception, which is more of a reduction than the cost of the royalty itself. So now you get all these benefits of like the franchise, like the marketing, the structure, the
Right.
ecosystem, the family, and it's also
Yeah.
cheaper than if you did it yourself. That's the economies of
Right.
scale that a franchisor should provide.
Should provide, right? Sometimes they
Yeah.
don't, but you're right. That's what I'm buying into. The ability to do things that I can't do on my own.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Because you and I, we could open up a waxing store. It's not so hard. Got to get somebody licensed to do it, or sign a lease to get some money, get some chairs, and off you're running, right? But
Yeah,
all that other
100%.
stuff
I mean,
becomes difficult.
yeah, I really think like I didn't really know what I was doing. So for the first like 5 years, I was really figuring things out, and that made it slow to market. And the
Yeah.
other thing that the unintended thing that people don't also think of is that a franchise is a business that has a proven business model, and banks will loan on
Yeah.
that. They're not going to loan on your
Right.
junk business that you've never started before, but you can get a 10%
Right.
down SBA loan to do a franchise.
Right. If the franchise has a good track record and has a proof of concept and all that kind of stuff, because they're going to look at all that stuff, right? What are you buying? I would
Yeah,
assume.
exactly. Yeah, so SBA SBA is kind of funny. They're not going to vet your business to see if it's a good business. Like they don't care if you've been in
Right.
Entrepreneur Magazine or anything. They only care that you're non-discriminatory, that you filed the appropriate regulations, and that like, you've listed a document that says you do what you're supposed to do. Like so that's like the SBA criteria.
Right.
The bank is going to vet that you could pay for that franchise loan without the franchise making money. They want to see that you can at least pay that amount. But if you can,
Right.
you can leverage
Other
debt
assets.
fairly well to start a franchise.
Yeah. Are you talking about from a franchisor standpoint or a franchisee standpoint?
Franchisee standpoint. Yeah.
Franchisee. Okay, got it. So during those 5 years of building the business, what are some of the things you look back, you say, oh, that was a mistake. We figured this out. We did that wrong, so we changed it. Yeah, those types of things.
Yeah, I can like look at very specific stages of like the growth of an entrepreneur. Like stage 1 was, who are you? What's your brand identity? And in this stage, I did a lot of ads on Facebook and Meta at the time, and I started with a couple of concepts. One concept was like a high fashion person. One was I'm a swimsuit. I'm having fun at the beach. One was like girls' night out, and then the fourth concept was, for lack of a better word, this is actually what it's called. So like I'm not just being discriminatory here, but like they're called fat bikinis. It's a bikini for larger people. Okay. And I tested that concept, and it absolutely crushed the other concepts. It was like 4 times as much engagement. And I remember, even 9 years ago, I remember this girl on the comment saying, I love that you're using real women. And then you couple that with the fact that like all of the positive reviews I saw said that she makes me feel comfortable. And I was like, there's something here. So I built my brand around making women feel comfortable. And so every decision I made on the concept or the identity was about that. That was like year 1. And then move on to year 3. I still hadn't figured out incentives. And this was like a big aha moment for me. Like you have to align the incentives of the employee with the desires of the owner. And they were misaligned. I remember looking at 2 employees, both a year into their business, business, and one was an all-star, one was a complete failure, and they're paid the same. And I'm like, how am I paying the all-star the same as this failure? It's because I was paying on time at the company, which is where most people like lie. And I'm like, I'm missing the mark here. So I switched it to pay I gave raises based on if they've sold memberships. And the more memberships you sell, the faster you hit a higher commission. And also based on their sales for the month prior, they can get bonuses based on that. And
build a clientele, build their own clientele, right?
100%.
Yeah,
and
like
literally
hair
the
salons.
month after I did this, the business doubled in membership sales. It was like the biggest aha moment for me.
Yeah, you like figured that out.
Yeah, there's there's probably 5,000 other of those like little ones, but the fifth one, like the
Right.
fifth year I had this huge one, and this was like right before franchising. So I used to think that there were
Okay.
two ways to increase profits.
Right.
One is you do more
Yep.
scale, so you increase your volume, or two, you
Right.
lower your cost. And I spent like an enormous amount of time on both of these things to try to get maximize like efficiency out of the business. And then COVID hits.
Okay.
And the cost of gloves, which we use gloves, medical gloves, quadrupled in
Ridiculous.
price.
Yeah.
Sticks, like the tongue depressors, you go, you put
Yeah.
like those things. That's
Yeah.
what we used to wax. Yeah.
Right. To supply the wax. Yeah.
Tripled in
Well,
price.
you don't. Yeah. You don't even think about these things. Like something would happen that's medically related to our entire society and would affect all of your supplies. Right. I mean, who would think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that tripled, and then Cavicide, which is like it kills AIDS. It's like 409 on steroids. Yeah, that also tripled in price. And so we had all of these like costs that went up massively. And we shut down for
Yeah.
5 weeks in Phoenix. And at that time, I'm like, okay, am I going to lose my business? Like, I don't even know if I can make it. And I
Right.
spent a lot of time analyzing, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to lose people. If I lose people, then the volume's
Right.
less. I have to raise prices. And so I raised prices 18% over that time period. And I remember
Right.
being so scared. I
Yeah.
the minute I sent the email, I just watched for the text messages to come in. And people didn't even blink. It was the strangest thing
No.
to me. I was
I
way
think everyone
too
really,
underpriced.
and I think people were also like accepting of the fact that everything's going up. Like their groceries were going up, and
Yep.
they don't expect you're paying for more groceries, and things are going to go up, and that's just the way it was. Me too. I raised my prices, and it was a weird time. So I think it was a good time to raise your prices because it wasn't so surprising to anybody, right? People were like, of course, his prices are going up. Milk
Yeah,
just doubled in
100%.
price. That. Yeah.
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 And then my
So
profit margin went from like 6, 7, 8% some
yeah.
months to like now I'm 18% higher in prices because the prices eventually went down to the goods. And so my profits became very
Okay.
healthy. And I could build a
Right.
business that I could like replicate and franchise.
Got it. But that was before you hadn't franchised yet, right?
No, that was like I needed to be there to be able to offer something I could franchise.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you talk about building the business, right? People overlook split test marketing. They don't really see the benefit of it, but you split tested until you found out what worked and why it worked. And it actually led you on a path to the customer, the ideal customer, and who these women were and why they wanted to come. And if you hadn't have done that, you'd have been guessing. You'd been like, well, we have a sign out. Why aren't everybody needs to wax? But that's not true. You figure out what it is. And I think that's a good lesson for people that are, wondering why they're not bringing in business. Probably because whatever their marketing's doing sounds great, but isn't working, or it's not resonating with people or whatever. So I think you have to do that stuff until you figure it out. And the other stuff is, kind of par for the course, except for COVID. And nobody anticipated that would happen.
Yeah.
But it gave you an opportunity, right? I mean, you just had to do it. What choice did you have? You go to that business, or you raise your prices. That's what
Yeah.
it was, right?
The other aha moment of COVID was we received membership money at the beginning of the month, and that pays for a service in the future. I was using that membership money to pay payroll for services in the past. And
Right.
so what was happening, and I didn't even think about this. I was like, money's in the account. Okay, I got to pay payroll. But what happened with COVID
Right.
is, Governor Ducey shut down at the very end of the month. And so for the next month, I didn't have any money coming in. So that membership money stopped, and I had to pay payroll for the past and rent in the future. And I realized at that point that like I was screwed, like really screwed, because I just kept such a lean business. And
Yeah.
then on, like I just basically took a line of credit and paid everything. And from then on, I started building up a reserve, like a war chest. Every
Yeah.
single month, I started building that war chest up. And that's
Yeah, it
like
was-
my COVID fund, if you will. Like if something else happens, like I know I've got 3 months of rent and 1 month of payroll on the books.
Yeah. So you're ahead of what's going on because there were no PPP loans at that point. That wasn't even an idea.
And business interruption insurance, that's total like baloney.
Doesn't
Like,
cover that.
doesn't cover that kind of stuff. Yeah, they have some
No.
kind of like workaround on it.
Yeah,
Government
of course.
funded
No, if you had a hurricane,
shutdowns.
exactly, and if you had a hurricane and it ripped the electrical off your building, that would be business interruption. But now they got all kinds of COVID restrictions. So, excuse me, when you just said something and it made me want to ask you a question about so you run the business on a subscription-based model? Is that what it is? People pay a monthly fee. I go to my barber like that. I pay a monthly fee. I can go as many times as I want. Actually, I go a few times and then there's an upcharge, but it's not a full charge. Is that the way it kind of works at your locations?
Yeah, membership model, 20% off, prepay for your service, come in and get your service. If you want multiples, they're all at like membership pricing. And I think in
Got it.
today's world, membership's the way to go. Like all our competitors sell packages. The problem with packages is that you're paying a lot up front and not everybody can afford that. And so instead,
Right.
you sell memberships. Memberships lower the barrier to entry because it's like easy to sign up for it. And then
Hold your own cat.
yeah, and then because you get that membership money the first of the month, you can pay rents and payroll, like I was doing before, and just it kind of like funds you to get through the month. So it's a win for everybody, and members are going to be more loyal to you. They're not going to go to another salon because they prepaid
They're going to use your service. Right,
Yeah.
and you're encouraging them to use your service, so it improves your relationship with them and word of mouth and all that kind of stuff. I think that's I think the whole salon industry missed that whole thing. You know?
especially in businesses where competition is relatively agnostic. Like for your hair service, I can imagine that you could go to many places. But if your barber decides like, hey, like I'm sick, like let's say they're fully booked that day, normally you could just call up another company, like go to Tony and Guy or something. But for you, you've got a membership. Like you're only going to this place. So that locks you into this customer base.
Yeah, I think it's what's that franchise? Kennedy's Barbershop. They're a franchise. I'm not sure if they've figured the model out, but it's supposed to be like a gentleman's barbershop where you pay whatever, something like that. But my is a local shop and they do subscription too. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about then the franchise thing, because you didn't know anything about franchising at that point, right? You just knew how to run this business, and then what epiphany did you have one day and said, "Oh, maybe I should franchise"? And how the hell do I learn that?
Yeah, again, not that smart. Like this isn't like I think people look back at their life and they're like this perfect path to success, like like hang on every word this person says because he made it. Not that way for me. So with franchising, I just remember thinking this business runs a lot like software, where the multiples on franchising are much higher than the multiples on retail units. So I was like, okay, I could do 3 to 5x, on a sale of the business today. If I package it differently, I could sell it for 13 to 15x. That was my thinking. I was like, European franchise sold for 18x. Maybe I can get 13 if I just package this differently. Completely oblivious to how hard and how like extremely, extremely difficult it is to scale a franchise.
Yeah. Well, how did you get started? Did you find a franchise company to help you? Did you start writing? Because you got to write all these manuals and everything yourself, right?
Yeah. Okay. So the first year, 2020, I started doing all the research, and basically you need what's called an FDD, a financial disclosure document. It's similar to K1 in stocks. Like, if publicly traded companies use a K1, but it's basically a 100-page document. Oh yeah. You're a lawyer. You know all about these things. FDD is a beast, and it's like 20 different things. It's going to tell things like how much it costs to start up, what are your profits of your locations making, like financial disclosure, and have you been sued before, and how many units you have today, how many units are you building, do you have trademarks? Like it's basically like a registry built by the government of specific things you need to look for. And
because you can't make any representations to people without it being the FDD. Like you can't say, oh, we're this profitable if you don't have it in your FDD. It's not like you're not allowed to do that. You're in trouble.
Yeah, I wonder how people sell franchises, because a lot of FDDs they don't put profits, they just put revenues.
I know because they're violating the law, but they haven't gotten caught probably.
Yeah, and like you said, like somebody could sue. There's 3 ways that people could sue. Number 1 is you tell them they're going to make X amount of money and they don't. Well, that's a problem.
Right.
If it's not in the FDD, you can't say it, like you said. Number 2 is they tell them it's going to cost $100,000 to start, and it costs $400,000, and they're like, dude, I ran out of money. Like I don't have $400,000.
Right.
So the item 7 is where it's at. Like that section needs to be very detailed on how much it's going to cost. You need a low and a high range, and the high range needs to be higher than like you even anticipate it could be.
Right.
And the third way that people sue is if you promise a form of performance, like you're going to train their staff and you just don't do it.
Right.
Like you just peace out on them.
Right. Especially if you make promises that aren't in the FDD. And yeah, you can't make misrepresentations like that. So people will be like, wait, you said that you make 20% profit. You're like, I never said that. What are you talking about?
I'm like,
Good luck.
I even say like in in my franchise agreement, if it's not written in here, it doesn't count. Like this is the only thing that matters.
No,
right?
that's
like
right. Only stuff in writing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, how's your experience been with franchisees? Have it been, you got to be careful with who you deal with. Everybody's been great. I mean, what kind of experiences have you had there?
Yeah. So I got advice from somebody that I thought was really prescient. He said, run it like an inverted hockey stick. Like in the very beginning, go really slow, and then eventually hit your exponential curve of scale. Because your first franchisees, everyone's looking at them to see how they performed, and they're contactable. Your first franchisees are, so they're going to contact them. They're going to phone them and say, "Hey, is this a good business? Is Brigham helping you?" So the first 2 franchises I paid for myself. And I helped them open, and they're in like Tucson and Flagstaff. They're just Arizona areas, and they were like old employees. So I was like, I don't have to teach them anything. They just literally and that went well. And then 3 months later, I'm like, dude, they're making profit. And I went to like 2 of my closest friends, and I was like, try to franchise. And they're like, okay. And I was like, look, I'll do it with you. So we all 3 opened in different markets: Nashville, Houston, and Colorado. And in these 3 markets, the first 6 months were hell. Like I was running 3 businesses, not even my own, just trying to figure it out. Right. Basically, I ran a lot. Like I spent a heavy amount of time investing in their businesses, and we figured it out. Eventually, the iterations between franchises, like the degree of change that we made at the franchisor level, started to get smaller and smaller. And at that point,
you learn more.
Yeah, it's like software, right? Like betas on software. And at that point, once the iterations became small, that's when I started bringing this to the public and sharing it with other people. So I had other friends and network get in until that point. And once it started going to the public, you can think I was a lot like a gazelle. Like, a gazelle's like eating grass or whatever in the African plains, and he hears like a noise, and the gazelle that's like, oh, that's just the wind. That's the one that gets eaten, the one that's like, yeah, the one that's like, oh, is that a lion? Is that what was that? Like, those are the ones that survive. And that's how I treated like every potential franchisee. I'm like, like this guy's nice, but I don't like the way he talks about this. And I was just like, not work with him, and like, like seriously, because it's 10-year marriage, with people.
Yeah. And it's everything. It's not just his success. If he fails, it hurts your system and your ability to sell more franchises. You pick the wrong guy. It's huge.
Yeah, Mitch, I remember one guy was like drinking a beer during our he's just hanging out drinking a beer. Yeah, during like the call.
Okay.
And I was like, I don't know. Like,
it wasn't like you met at a bar.
Yeah, like this is like a 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like you're drinking a beer at 3 in the afternoon. And I remember we had 2 meetings, and both meetings he was like, hold on a second. And he had to go like get the door. Like it's just like life seemed chaotic, and I pick up on those things, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not interested. Like, I don't care if you have money. Like, I'm not interested.
Yeah, no. If it's chaotic now, what's it going to be like when you're working with these guys?
But like, I see a lot of like if I were doing a franchise, I would look for economies of scale, and I would look to see that they've been around for 3 years, but not so long that the whole market is filled up. Like those would be my criteria in a franchise. And because the first 3 years, like, the franchisor is not making money. They're not. They don't have enough people in the system to pay the salaries of a really good franchise, right? We found interesting ways around that, but like the reality is, you need scale. You need it.
Yeah.
But to get scale, you've got to let people into your business. And so there's this like really conflicting dichotomy of like, I need this guy in the system, but he's drinking a beer during the call, and I cannot bring this person in.
Clearly issues, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
But you can't think of, I need the money now. You got to think of the whole system and the people that you're supporting and the people that are supporting you, right? Even your friends, like they kind of bought into you because they know you and
Yeah.
they said, okay, let's do this. Right. And that's kind of why you want to start small and start with people that you know so they can support you, because the next people that are doing it are really taking a risk, right? Because they're
Huge.
new to the system. Maybe they're number 5 and 6, right? That's not much. So I've seen a lot of franchises just fall apart, 8 to 10 locations,
Yep.
and the franchisor can't support them, doesn't keep up with them, whatever. And then they all, go out of business.
Yeah.
So,
It's really
yeah.
scary. Like, you got to think like a franchisor is the mothership. And,
Yeah.
talking with an attorney, like the franchisor has to be protected, right? So like in the agreements favor the franchisor, and they rightfully should, because we're not just making
Yeah.
a deal with Mitch, we're making a deal with 100 other people. So if Mitch sues the franchisor, that affects all of the other
Right.
businesses, right? So we've got to be rock solid
Everybody. Yeah.
protected.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you can't change the contract all the time. I've seen people say, well, maybe we can negotiate the contract. Well, the more flexible that the franchisor is being on the contract raises issues, right? Like, well, what other deals are they making with other people and how are they changing it? It's got to be pretty streamlined in terms of the system to be fair to everybody and to deal with it. So let me ask you this question. How many franchises did you have to the point where you said, okay, now we got a little breathing room because we got more cash flow, we could do more things, and the hockey stick's kind of moving up the thing there.
Yeah, so we've doubled every year for 3 years. So now that we're at like 90 units,
Yeah.
we'll hopefully be around 150 units this year. And every
Yeah.
year, including this year, my profit margin is like razor thin on the franchisor level. I'm
Bill.
basically trying to take everything I make and just invest it into franchisees. I just want to make an incredible business. I can live off of my own stores in Phoenix, right? So last year we put 250,000 to AI tech. Last year I hired 8 people, and payrolls
Right.
are 100,000 plus on almost everybody in the company, and it has to be that way
Right.
to attract really good talent to come work in the company. And I'm thinking about this at a 500 plus unit scale and not where are we at today. So, I've got to put those things in place. And in software companies, they don't care if you burn money, right? Like they just care that eventually you're going to be profitable, not like profitable today. It's fine. And so, yeah, we're just like heavily invested in testing and growing in unique ways.
Right. But you are actually profitable. You're just reinvesting. Yeah. You're making capital investments into systems
CapEx.
And improving things.
Yeah, we are profitable.
Got it.
We've been profitable since year one. I'm really proud of that. Like we ran a very lean startup. I told the people in the company in the beginning, I was like, look, like I can't pay you what a normal franchisor would pay. Like if you want to be part of this ride, we're going to grow this like crazy, and we have, and it'll be worth it, on the back end when like the transaction happens. But today, like you're going to get paid a little less, like the typical startup mentality.
Right. So if you someday sell the franchise, will the franchisees benefit from that the way you have it structured?
Franchisees, no. I mean, well, they'll benefit from structure, but they're not going to benefit financially from that. Yeah, and like I've told the group as well, like eventually we'll have a transaction, but the transaction will be a partial transaction and not a full. And I've set the agreements up in a way that like everything is very explicitly laid out, uniquely so in franchising, so that everyone's protected. Right. I don't want people to worry that they're going to raise prices on them or that the contract's going to change. Like, no, like it's set in the contract. This is how it is. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've had situations where people are franchisees and the system got bought and the contract was up and the new owner was like, listen, we're doubling the cost and this. And he's like, I can't operate that way. I'm a small business owner. Well, we want you to hire 20 people. And he's like, the kind of franchise it was, he was like, older and he didn't want to do that. So now he was stuck with non-competes and all kinds, and we had to negotiate him out of it. Yeah. So you got to be careful, but it's important to read what you're doing, right? I mean,
yeah, I've waited on a PE transaction, private equity, until I feel really strong about the identity of the company, because I don't want a PE group coming in and saying we're going to change X, Y, and Z about this to make more money. Because PE, like look at European Wax, they're the largest in the industry, 1,050 doors. They sold as a public company on the promise that they're going to be at 3,000 units in the country, and that's feasibly not possible for them. It's not.
No.
And you look at what they're trading for. Like a typical unit will cost 400,000 to start up. The company, European Wax on the public market, is trading at $1.6 million per door that's open. So you think about that. They're trading at 4 times what it would cost to start a unit, the publicly traded franchisor. It makes absolute no financial sense.
But they should be trading at 3 to 5 net revenue.
Yeah, no, they're no. They're trading like 100x revenue. Like they're 100x like
Crazy.
profit. Like it's insane. Like they're making like, I think they said 4 to 6 million in a quarter with 1,000 doors. I'm like, how are you burning that much cash? Like it makes no sense to me.
Right. Yeah. No. If you break it down, it doesn't come to much, right?
Yeah, it doesn't come to much
Per door.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of things.
So you're saying that 3,000 locations is too much? It's an oversaturation of the market. You can't get that big. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean they're saying that they can. They're going to infill until the point that it kills their business. Infills in franchising is a scary thing because franchisees have exclusives on territories, and if they over infill on something, then everybody like makes less money, right? So they'll just keep trying to infill until it kills their business. But the other problem they run into is staffing, right? Like, sure, they could put 25 units in Phoenix, absolutely. But they'll never be able to go to a Flagstaff, Arizona, because there's 72,000 people in the town and there are 0 cosmetic or aesthetic schools. So that market's off limits. Like, you're not going to be able to fill 14 people there.
Right. Nobody's going to relocate to Flagstaff to do this.
Yeah, you could barely find like 3 people there. So it's spending $400,000 on a market size of 72,000 people is like not going to happen. It makes no sense.
Right. What is your startup cost? If somebody wanted to start one of your franchises, what's the cost to do it? Roughly?
Yeah, so we're very successful in Flagstaff, Arizona. And that's because our startup was a lot similar to the model that I started myself with. We open up in salon suites. Salon suites are $60,000 to get started. And the profit margin on these after a year are averaging like 60 to 80,000, with top quartile being 115,000. Yeah, and these suites take 2 to 3 months to start. So you could get 2 or 3 of these suites going and make like way more than a salary, and it takes like 10 hours a week to manage. It's really like a cool business.
You're renting a portion of the salon from the salon owner? Is that what a suite is?
No, a salon suite is a new concept in the past 5 years, and it's actually making it really difficult for like salons, like barber salons now. Like we're taking over spaces of barber salons that like go out of business because they can't find people. So basically, you can go to like think WeWork, but for salons.
Yeah.
So you can go to these salon suite concepts, rent a room. There's like 50 rooms in this building. And you rent for like $250 a week, $350 a week, and you can open up your own business there. We just go start in rooms like that, and then we just pummel tons and tons of marketing money into socials to bring people into the door.
Got it. So the salon, do you start the salon suites, or is this a marketplace where the wax, the franchisee can plug in? They exist.
Yeah, we have a database of all of them in the country. So we like even know where to start. We start looking for them. We help you find a suite. You're up and fully operational within 3 months.
Wow.
And then
now, how did you how did you find out about suites, or what? Like, how did that come about?
I was poor. That's all I could do at the beginning, right? So like this was like,
it existed then, even then.
Yeah, it existed then. Not to the scale it is today. Today, there's these massive franchises that are building tons and tons of units across the country.
I don't see those like in the New Jersey, New York area. They must be here. I just don't. I don't see them. I see salons.
Yeah, Sola, Phoenix Salon Suites, Salons by JC. Those are some of the bigger players in the market, like and they're in your area as well. But those, so like I start in there. I get through a year, you prove the model, season the clients, season the staff, season you as an owner, and then go get a bank loan to change this into a real flagship unit. So you're able to test a market before you really build into it. And this is a great like step risk function, right? Like the step risk is like, it's like easier. So why would you spend $400,000 in a year of your life building something you have no idea is going to work? Start a suite, and like heaven forbid, worst case scenario doesn't work, move it down the street. Like it takes a week to change the location.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that just increases their risk. The more capital you got to put in
Exactly.
at the beginning, it's like test marketing, right? Don't put all your money into one marketing campaign. You got to do small ones and test things and try them out and see what works. Because
100%.
like you said, the marketplace is going to vary depending on where you are, the location and so forth.
Yeah,
Right?
100%. Yep. And we've had
Yeah.
suites that were like, dude, this isn't working. I'm like, let's change it to the other side of town. And it starts to work.
Yeah. So do you see yourself at some point looking at other businesses that you could grow and then maybe not even in that industry that could grow and build other franchise systems, or like what's your long-term goal?
Yeah. I mean, right now I've got my head down. I want to build a national company. And so we're well on our way to doing that. We've got some really cool things happening in the works right now. And I've
Nice.
got at least a 5-year run on this. And then after that, we'll see where that goes. But the way I take it, I have a fiduciary duty to my franchisees. I can't really be doing it.
Yeah.
I divested of all my other companies to focus 100% on this, because if you're putting your life savings in, Mitch, to start a franchise, like I better be focused. I better be taking care of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's one of the failures of some of these smaller franchisors is they don't do anything for their franchisees, and the people are like stuck trying to figure it out on their own, and it's terrible because you took their
Yeah, I
money
mean,
and they had faith. They took a chance with you.
yeah, that's where, I mean, we weren't doing this by like lack of effort, but the first year is like that. Like, I think my business got really
Yeah.
good the first year because of franchisees. Like, Mitch, if like your house is probably clean, but if I were to come to your house and you knew I was going to be a guest, you'd probably take the dishes out of the sink. You'd probably like, vacuum a little bit extra. And it's the same thing with franchising. Like, my business was like a clean house, but when you come into my business and you're like, how do you hire? And I'm like, I don't really have a process for this. I just kind of feel it. Then you go through and you build the process. And in the
Right.
process of systematizing your entire business, your entire business gets better. And that's been the
Yeah, of
case
course,
for
because
me.
that's something that people should do,
Yeah.
right? People should do. They should write a business plan, and then as they're going, that plan becomes operational manuals. How you hire and fire people and deal with things, your marketing system, your financials, all that type of stuff that you get by becoming a franchisee in a good system like yours, because people don't have those skills or they don't do it on their own, even though they should. Right? I mean, I would assume that all your franchisees have to write a business plan, right?
Franchisees have a business plan. That's what the franchise is. The franchise has we don't want you to think about that. It's already written out for you.
No.
Like, don't reinvent
Got
the
it.
model. It's exceptionally well written out at this point.
Yeah.
And
Okay. So you give them a business plan. They're buying it from you, basically.
exactly. Yeah, 100% right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I think that's like speed. We think about systems and why. Systems, I
Yeah.
think, are the third place of speed, right? So the first thing that you do is you try to build something at as low of a startup cost as possible to test the market, right? So me, it was the suite concept versus the flagship being a 1,200 square foot space. Then the next thing you do once you test is if you want speed, the next thing you do is you go get a loan, because loans leverage debt, and debt is a throttle for speed. And then the final thing you do is you start to automate systems and replicate. So in my case, for example, you build into multiple units. And just like you're talking about, Mitch, that's like stage 3. It's build systems so you can automate, so you can increase speed. Like the SR-71 Blackbird was the fastest plane out there. And its only defense was speed, right? Speed is a good offense and a defense. I mean, there's like 3,000 missiles shot at it and they just hit the burners, right? They just couldn't catch it. Speed is a great market offense and a defense.
Yeah. Okay. So, since we've got about 50 minutes on this thing, what advice do you have for people? I think you're giving a lot of advice, but if you were looking back, it's only been a few years, but is there anything you would do differently so far, or you think you kind of worked your way past all the problems and you're where you want to be?
I don't know. I'm not like some guru at this kind of stuff. We put our heads down and work really freaking hard. I think with complexity of business, like you need to ask yourself, like, how complex is this business? I was talking to somebody yesterday and they're like, dude, what is the simplest, dumbest thing I could do? Because I overcomplicate everything in business, right? Like I'm trying to shoot for the moon on things. But I think if you're
Yeah.
going to take, like, I think when you're starting a business, you need to look at it and say, how complex is this, right? Franchising is extremely complex. Running a salon
Right.
might not be that complex, right? And depending on the degree of complexity of your business, depends on how many and how well you need to hire. Like the execution of the hiring process, the degree of necessity goes up with complexity. And you need to look at that and
Right.
say, yeah, because you need to look at that and say, okay, if this is complex, do I have the money to hire the right people? And can I get the right
Right.
people in my business to make this work? And if
Right.
it's
Because
not
they may need
complex,
skill for it, right?
yeah, because in the beginning you're wearing a lot of hats, right? So like if it's an easy business, you can do that. But with franchising, like you need lawyers, you need operational directors, you need salespeople, you need technical directors. Like there's like a whole list of like really important people that you need to make a complex business function, and you got to get those
Right.
right. And so,
Yeah.
the first step after you've figured out your business and you've got the idea of scale is hire the right people. And I think, as a CEO, your balls drop, for lack of a better term, when you
Right.
fire your first round, right? Because in the beginning, you can't
Yeah.
hire those quality staff members. So you kind of like you start to outgrow them, right? Like even your COO or your CEO, if you're like having somebody run your company, like or manager, I guess in most people's cases, like you got to fire
Yeah.
that person. At some point, you will
Yeah.
outgrow them if your business is growing, and that's when like a CEO is
Yeah.
like, I got to do the right thing for the business, even though that breakup causes me a lot of emotional turmoil. Getting the hiring right is,
Yeah.
I think, one of the biggest keys to success for people.
Yeah. Some of it's just luck. I mean, because, it's hard. We're all human beings. We're emotional people. You meet somebody, you're like, oh, I love that person. And you then therefore overlook things that maybe you shouldn't be overlooking. And you're right. Maybe they're good for the business right when you start, but when it's a really specialized job, they're not the right person. And it's hard to move them because now they're your friend and they've been working with you from the beginning. And, that's definitely one of the Achilles heels of business success, whether it's franchises or not franchises, it doesn't really matter.
Luck
I was
favors the
never good.
prepared. Luck favors the
Yeah,
prepared.
that's a very good piece of advice. Luck favors the prepared. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what happens, right? If you're on, that's why people don't just get lucky in and of themselves. They make luck because they are prepared and they are working hard, and then stuff happens. It's just
Yeah.
weird like that, but it does.
I had a business partner in like the first 5 years. It was the first esthetician I hired, and she was
Okay.
like family to me. And by year 5, we had a falling out with some business things that we just had different paths in life. And I am
Okay.
so grateful she like left the business. I needed to let her go. I needed to fire her. But I couldn't have done it. Emotionally, I wasn't, my balls hadn't dropped as a CEO. Like, and looking back, it was the best thing that could have happened to the business. But I personally
Right.
didn't have the fortitude to do something like that at that time. And
Right.
and now I look back and think everything that happened good was because she was out of the business, right? Like that the
Yeah.
business would not be what it is today if that anchor kept us like down from being able to like sail, yeah. So like hiring is so important, man. Getting it right, so important.
I know. It's something you got to keep doing and be a leader. And it's hard. It's hard,
Yeah.
but I have a great appreciation for what you're doing, how you're doing it. I mean, you're very humble about it, but you shouldn't be.
Thanks, Mitch.
In terms of in terms of what you're building and so forth. But I think it also it attests to the fact that the people that I meet through my work, as a business lawyer and through the podcast and so forth, the ones that like understand about fundamentals of running a business, not the business, but running a business, the elements that you need, the things you have to do, tend to be more successful. I mean, they're not successful at everything that they do. I'm not suggesting you're going to sell this thing and then the next thing you get into is going to be wildly successful. It might not.
Yeah.
But because they use the principles, that they've learned and they've tried and they've tested and they keep doing that, or maybe it's in their personality or whatever, they tend to have streaks of success. They don't, I mean, people that have gone into business, right? Because it's an industry that they know. They worked for a company or whatever. And then either they sell the business or they move out of the business, they give it to somebody else, whatever. They go into a new business that they think is a great business and they totally fall on their face.
Yeah. Yeah.
because they weren't using fundamentals before. They were just figuring it out because they knew the business.
Yep.
And yeah, that's the biggest problem, right? I mean, franchising helps with a lot of that as a franchisee.
Yeah.
You know?
In my business, they call it multi-unit retail chains. And they're
Got it.
all like in my head, they're all the same. Like, right, running a multi-unit salon is very similar to running a multi-unit name the business, right? So you're exactly
Yeah.
right. Like once the template's there, you could do it no matter what the service is. I often
Yeah.
like think about this fact. Like I know very little about waxing, and I run a very large waxing company. You know, like
Yeah.
it's weird.
Have you
The
ever
actual product doesn't matter as much.
waxed anybody?
I'm actually good at waxing. I wax. I built our sugar. Like I tested our sugar, and so for a
Okay.
year I was like ripping hairs off my arm with sugar. Like so, I
Nice.
got good at it during that time. But like if you asked me to do a Brazilian wax, I'd have no clue how to do this.
Got it. Yeah, people should read about sugaring because there's a place open in my town about sugaring. It's very big now, so
Yeah,
it's a hot area. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. All right, so this is a great conversation. I mean, really good about what you're doing, what you're competing, what you're growing to. So good, I forgot to play the commercials, so I'll have to edit them in later in the middle for our sponsors. Yeah. And what's the best way if people want to learn about you, learn about the franchise, maybe look at the opportunity? What's the best way to connect with you? I assume we'll put it in the show notes, but I assume there's a website for the company, right?
Yeah, just Google Hello Sugar Franchising and we'll come up. That's the easiest way to connect with us if you want to learn more about Hello Sugar Franchising. And my name is Brigham Dallas, and I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah, you're on LinkedIn, and I guess you could do Facebook and Instagram stuff too for the business, or no?
Yeah, like look, I'm on Instagram. I post there because it makes my wife happy. Like
Right.
she likes to see pictures of us, but like I don't get on there very much, to be honest.
Right. All right. So I appreciate coming on. It's early where you are, and I'll roll the credits and just stick around.
Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate being on your show.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Accidental Entrepreneur. Opening and closing music written and performed by Howie Moskovich and made to order music. For information about Howie and his music services, please follow the link in our show notes. If you like the podcast, please tell others about us. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and most of the other podcast directories. If you like what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review and feel free to share our episodes on social media. If you have any questions or comments, ideas for the show, or you'd even like to appear as a guest, reach out to us by email at info@beinhackerlaw.com.
The Accidental Entrepreneur is hosted by Mitch Beinhacker and produced by Beinhacker Law. If you'd like to learn more about our business and legal services, you can find us on social media or visit our website at beinhackerlaw.com. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to our feed to be notified of all future episodes.